Hey, welcome back to the Fix-It Show. We've been busy with all sorts of projects. We built a couple Elsinores right here. 75, 125. It's getting a new top end, and just freshened up completely rebuilt the 74, 250. Made it look like the Gary Jones factory replica bike. And I heard we're going to be starting to work on some mini bikes again. So we got an XR100 motor here. We're waiting for some parts, and it needs to be cleaned a little bit first. You don't want any of that dirt in your motor. So I'm going to clean that up and get going.
Hey Paul.
Yo.
So I just got, buddy, I got my parts.
Okay, well, we're about ready to install them.
Start building that little 120. XR100 to a 120.
What'd you get? What'd you get? Bring it on in.
We got everything here.
Okay, so this is the kit that you buy for about 175 bucks on eBay by TP Performance, I believe. TB Performance.
Let me clean up a little.
Yeah, you clean up that motor. So you get a new oversized 58 millimeter piston. Get a new pin, clips, and barrel.
Acting rod.
What? Rod pin. That's piston pin, yes. There's a couple things. You want to make sure you have a Honda manual also, because you want to check other people's work to make sure it's going to go in correctly. Check your ring end gap, just to make sure everything's up to specs. So we'll show you how to do that. And then it's a good idea also to buy a gasket kit. I thought maybe it'd come with it. You're probably going to need a... Oh, it did.
It does come with it, buddy.
Somebody unloaded the box before me. Okay, good. Beautiful, Jimmy. So let me take this over to a clean table, and we'll show you how to set the ring gap and put the rings on. Alright, we're going to check some tolerances on the new parts, just so we build it and have a little confidence. So now you're going to go to your Honda manual for the XR100, and at the table 2 it tells you to check your ring end gaps. So that's what we're going to show you what we're doing. And it says 6 10,000ths to 18 10,000ths. So find your 2 top rings. You have a total of 2 top rings, an oil ring which goes at the bottom, and that oil ring gets 2 real thin rings sandwiched above and below it. The oil ring has these holes in the piston. It's a little wider ring gap. So start with one of your top rings, stick it in the bore, and then I take the piston and go down to about the first line to get the ring squared up inside the bore. Okay, bring it around to the first line, and that would make your ring pretty squared up in there. Then take your feeler gauge with the right number on it, which between 6 and 18, we'll go about 10 10,000ths of an inch. And then you put that in the gap where your ring is, and make sure it's within tolerances. Should just fit in there snugly. And these are thin little feeler gauges, so it's kind of tricky. There you go. And if that flies, that ring is good. Go to your next ring. You wouldn't want these ends to be touching or too much binding in there, or also too loose, or you'll have low compression and be burning oil. So it's pretty important to check ring gap. You could do that with your 2 strokes also. Do you want to know how much, if you need new rings or not? If you've been running your bike for a year or so, it's real easy to check your ring gap and replace it before you wear your bore out and your piston. So that is how you check your ring gap. So that's good. Everything's good. Then we'll start putting the oil ring on first. once it's all checked. And then the second ring. And there is a difference between the second ring and the top ring. One of them is, if you can tell, is more of a chrome color on the outside edge and the darker one. So refer to your manual and it'll show you which one goes where. And it looks like the chrome one is going to be in the second hole. Another thing to look for is get a magnifying glass, and there's an up or down on the ring. There's letters. And use some better light in the shop here. There's a letter R on one side of the ring. That would go up. You want to make sure you do that too. Okay, so we'll start assembling and then we'll come back and show you the next step once we get the rings on the piston.
You gonna teach me?
Where you been? When it gets good, you take off.
Room outside.
I'm not doing it again. You're gonna have to watch the video. Sorry.
Here we've got Paul assembling the rings onto the new piston. Little tricky operation, actually.
Yeah, the oil ring is one of the trickiest parts of this whole job, is to get seated properly with the two rings above and below it. So take your time and a little bit of patience and you'll get it.
Definitely makes a difference. The letters have to be up.
Yeah, because sometimes they're tapered. And the taper has to go in the right direction. And you also don't put the ring groove one on top of the other. They're opposite usually. And there you go. We got the oil ring, which has a flat ring top and bottom of it. And then the chrome ring. And then the black ring. So this piston, with a little bit of lubrication, will be ready to go down into our new cylinder once we get the old motor apart. So let's go at it. Back to the shop. You can do this in your bike, which I have. You don't have to make a base, but this holds it a little steady. So we're going to first take the valve cover off. You've already got your carburetor and exhaust off, obviously. We're going to take the valve cover off, and then we're going to, boy, somebody really tighten that. Then we're going to remove the cam and all that stuff under the cover. Okay, when you pull your valve cover off, then you can get up on top of the head. You take your spark plug out, make this so you can turn it, and then now you can get your motor to top dead center. And that'll put the piston at the top. So I put a little screwdriver in here and I can feel the piston coming up and hitting the top. And at that top dead center, your valves should also have a little bit of play in them. That's the time you adjust your valves. There's marks on your flywheel. Go to your book and you'll see which marks you put it on and how much lash you should have at your valves. This bike, actually, the intake valve's a little bit too tight, so it doesn't matter, we're going to redo all that. But this is the time now that you could pull this up and take your timing chain off and timing gear, because we're going to remove everything off the head to pull the barrel up. So once you got that, you can release your timing gear. I might have to have a friend hold the motor because I can't do this all. It's gonna move around on me. You're gonna have to come help me. Okay, so we got the two cam bolts out. We can just leave that gear on for now. We'll take the head nuts off. I backed off. I took this 6mm bolt loose, and I backed. This is to adjust the chain tensioner. You can actually do this when the bike's running too, so I'll show you how to do that once we get it running. And you can pull the timing chain or the timing gear out, or leave it for now, and we'll take the head off and it'll all come loose. You want to look at your pads, and you can see the wear pattern. That one's not wearing real even, it's kind of wearing on the side. See if there's a lot of excess wear on your tappets there, the adjusters. And then you'll take note of, see it, the lobes in the cam are both facing down at TDC, and that's where you get your lash from. So when you put your cam back in, put both lobes. One's at about 7 o'clock and one's at about 4 o'clock, like that. And then you can pull your, man, no, I gotta get this gear off of here. And it's a little cumbersome, but we'll get it. There's the gear. Notice that 0 on there at the top. That's one of your timing marks. That goes at 12 o'clock noon when you're at TDC. So keep that in mind. Now another thing I do, sometimes I put a little bungee on here so you don't drop your timing chain down into the motor. And pull this out of here. That's your, see, that's a cam. That's to adjust your chain tensioner. And now it should lift off, and there's your barrel, there's your valves. There's the old piston and bore. And bolt. Now we got to knock the barrel loose. We'll hook this on the Husky tank. Wow, this barrel had some broken fins, Jimmy. Did you do that? We didn't do that. It was already like that.
Not sure.
Okay. Now, you can also slide this out. That's another chain tensioner on the forward side. And now we got to get a rubber mallet and knock this barrel loose. Alright, we're back with one of the more tedious jobs of the engine work. Is you need to remove all the old gasket material. So Jimmy stuffed some paper towels in the bottom end, and get yourself a single edge razor blade and start scraping the gaskets off with. Okay, so we took the small clip off one side of the piston, pushed the pin through real easy just by hand. They're just floating in there. Got the old piston off. Now we got the barrel off, obviously before the piston. So now you got to get this, take this cam chain guide off, pull the pin out and the set screw, and if you can see, there's a spring that goes into the little hole there. And then once you take that spring off, this will allow this whole assembly to drop out, and then you can put that in your new barrel. So I'm going to attempt to get the spring off of there and remove it.
These are parts that you will need to reuse again.
Oh, for sure. Okay. So we got that spring undone. Then you can slide that chain guide out of the old barrel and you're done with that. These holes here are for an external oil cooler. We don't have that, we're not going to use that. So the kit comes with 2 bolts with the brass washers to seal that up, and we're going to put these in so we don't have an external oil cooler. So now we're going to put the new piston on that we got the rings ready for. Right here it says intake, IN, that goes back to the intake side. So it's going to sit on the rod like that. So we'll assemble that. They give you a new pin and new clips. And line that up, intake side in, put your piston on. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one clip in one side of the piston first. Okay? And then we'll slide the pin through. Don't use your teeth. You can get the open end in first, and then take some needle nose, work that around and into the groove. In the book, it'll show where you should have the opening gap, as opposed to this hole here. It's usually the opposite side, and then I like to rotate it just to make sure that you're in the groove all the way around 360 degrees. That's just a second note. Okay, now we can put the other clip on. And then we're good to go. There we go. Okay. Take a little screwdriver, make sure we're set good. You don't want to have a pin come out, your clip come out. I usually like to take and push the pin back and forth, and just make sure that it won't pop the pins off, but pop the clips off. And I think we're good to go. Okay, once all your base gaskets cleaned off the case, I like to use a little bit of grease on the base gasket. It just lets it seat. I mean, just a thin layer. It makes it seat real nice, and just works out well. It's a good trick for CZs. Pretty sure it works on Hondas.
Rolling.
Okay, so we've got the new piston inside the new barrel. We wiped the top of the head off. There's the new head gasket they give you. You gotta hang on to your timing chain. Before you put the head on, make sure that you're on your gears on the crank with the bottom of the timing chain. I put it at TDC, so we're gonna be close when we go to set the cam in there. Now you got to get your timing chain guides lined up and drop her down here. So we're gonna put the cam in, like I said, with the lobes facing about what is that, about 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, something like that. Now you can, this is where you got to learn how to time your bike. You got to get the chain over the timing gear, and that 0 at TDC is supposed to be top dead center. So this is where you have to do it a couple times and take a stab at it until you get everything right. Get your timing marks back on the crank properly, and then that 0 is supposed to be straight up. And where it is now, you can see, is about 10 o'clock. So we're not even, we're close, but so now you can release the chain a little bit and roll. Try and get that to come around. That's more where it's supposed to be at TDC. Look at the marks in your book. We're going to go back and double check this, but which mark you're supposed to be lined up on the crank. I've got to review that right now before I go bolting this thing together. So I'm going to go look at the book, and we'll come back and finish her up. Alright, we got the head dropped on. I gave you some marks here on the dampener so you can see it better. There's a T and there's a line next to the T, and there's the arrow there. That's when you want to have that arrow on your timing chain straight up. There's not an arrow, there's a 0, and these two bolt holes are supposed to be flush with the top of the head here. So now you can turn it and bring your camera around with it because you can't get your nuts started, your bolts started, if I have to dump that out, if it's buried halfway under the motor there. So I'm going to bring it around a little bit more. Everything will still stay in timing. Bring the cam around because you're not really moving anything. Line that one hole up if you can. Don't drop it down into the motor. And I don't have that cam turned enough yet. It's a little tricky. Pry that lobe up a little if I can. Take it off and turn it a little. Okay. Now we'll turn this over a little. Give me a little room. Put it back on the cam. Come on, baby. There we go. Now it's back on the cam. And there's the hole. I should be able to get this started. Just be patient. There's a lot of little parts and you don't want to drop anything. Okay, now that should roll the cam back around where it should be. Now we'll go the opposite way, get the other bolt started. You notice I didn't tighten that yet. You want to get them both going in the cam first before you tighten anything. Actually, you could put your rocker assembly on before you even tighten these anyway, just to make sure everything's good. But if you notice, I'm going to take it back around to the T mark. Let's top dead center. The 0 is up on the gear, and those two are opposed to each other. And the lobes are sitting like I said. Now the manual says to fill this bucket full of oil in the head, so that cold startup, that you don't have your oil pumped up there yet, your cam won't be dry. So you put some oil in those lubes in that bucket. Now you're going to grab your rocker assembly and put it down where it was. It'll only go, well, no. Just I hope you made note of the which one was intake and exhaust. I just remember, but you could always mark it before you take it apart. Wouldn't be a bad idea. Get those over your sleeves. I put this first head bolt in just to kind of tighten everything up, so nothing moves around when we're, I just put it finger tight. So then it's for everything aligning. We are going to show you how to adjust the rockers then, once we get the head torqued down. So they all get a washer and a nut.
Here we are, getting ready to take the XR100 off the stand, which is now an XR120.
Yep.
Got the kit in, took about 4.5 hours. Plus putting the motor in for about an hour and a half.
Nah.
But
You got the brakes in.
remember, you need a manual for this bike to do this. They send you no information.
No instructions.
All right, here we go, guys. Initial start. One kit.